Well, the Secretary of State for Defence, Sir Michael Fallon, is preparing to board a plane to come north. He's on the line now. Good morning to you.
Good morning to you.
Does last night's vote make a second independence referendum more likely?
No, last night's vote, I think, confirms that Parliament is going to follow the overwhelming vote that we had in the referendum last year and get on now and negotiate a successful exit from the European Union, taking into account, the interests of all those affected, including Scotland, through the machinery we have for consulting.
So which areas of compromise do you expect from the UK government in these areas of consulting?
Well, I expect consultation, and the details and the white paper will be published later today. The bill itself will be considered in detail in committee in Parliament next week. There'll be plenty of opportunity for Scottish MPs to put their point of view. But as the negotiations start to get underway in the spring, there is this established machinery now through the Joint Ministerial Committee, whereby the ministers from Scotland and Wales and indeed Northern Ireland can be involved in the preparation of the negotiating mandate.
Indeed, and Nicola Sturgeon's attended a few of those meetings now, and she says Indeed. It's getting her nowhere.
Well, these meetings are there to allow the devolved nations, Scotland and Wales and Northern Ireland, to put their points of view across and to emphasise the points they want particular attention devoted to during the negotiations.
Which brings me back to my question: which areas will the UK government compromise on?
Well, I don't know what you mean by compromise. We want a successful exit in the interests of everybody, all sectors of the economy and all parts of the United Kingdom.
And you know that Scotland,
successful as possible.
But you know that Scotland voted to remain in the European Union. So to that end, the Scottish Government set out in a paper areas that they believe there should be compromise on.
Well, Scotland voted in a UK referendum, and overall the United Kingdom voted to leave. Now, we want to make that successful, and we're looking at all these particular areas, whether it's trade, whether it's security, whether it's defence, my own area, to make sure that when we do leave, that is done in the interests of everybody, and it's as smooth and successful as possible and doesn't jeopardise any of our interests.
Could Scotland have a different arrangement to the rest of the UK?
No, the UK is negotiating as a whole to leave the European Union, but obviously those negotiations are going to reflect the concerns and interests of Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland. Let me assure you of that.
But the Scottish Government says the interest of Scotland is best served by having access to the single market, if not full membership.
We absolutely need access to the single market. Of course we do. It's 40% of our exports at the moment. It's very important that our goods and services are able to be exported from Scotland, from England, across the European continent, and that'll be a key part of the negotiation.
But Scotland would not have a different
access on favourable
Scotland
terms.
would not have a different arrangement to the rest of the UK when it comes to the single market.
Well, Scotland has every interest in making sure that we do have continuing access to the European continent for goods and services, and Scotland is not going to get forgotten in that regard.
Just on the issue of a second independence referendum, you're quoted in the newspapers this morning as saying that the UK government would not grant a second independence referendum because obviously it would need Westminster consent.
We don't see the need for a referendum. I think this is a diversion. I mean, what the Scottish government should be focusing on is what it was elected to do, which is to improve school standards, get to grips with the problems in Scottish hospitals and reverse the serious rise in unemployment.
But with respect, that's not what you're saying in the newspaper this morning. You're saying in the newspaper when asked, would you facilitate another independence vote, you say, no, forget it.
I think all this talk of a second referendum is a diversion by the SNP away from their day job, which I know Ruth Davidson and the Conservatives have been harrying them on, which is to get to grips with the problems they were elected to deal with and not get into the theology of whether or not a second referendum should be held. They need to forget all that stuff and get on with what they were elected to do, which, as I say, is improving school standards, tackling the problems in the Scottish Health Service, and above all, helping to improve the Scottish economy, which is where it is alarming that unemployment is now rising again.
Nicola Sturgeon has just tweeted saying that the Tory idea of blocking a second independence referendum is out of fear. They know they're unelected, unpopular, and Brexit is toxic. They know they'd lose.
Well, again, she's trying to divert attention from her failure at the moment to get to grips with the main issues that affect Scotland, and that is not a referendum. What people in Scotland want to know is, do they have a government that's prepared to deal with the challenges in Scotland, particularly in schools and hospitals, and also in the economy? Anything else is a diversion.
But would the UK government, if it came to it, facilitate a second independence referendum?
We've made it clear that there's no need for a second referendum, and that the Scottish Government should be getting on and dealing with the things that a Scottish Government was elected to deal with. Nicola Sturgeon is simply trying to divert attention away from our own failure. The focus should be on the things that matter to the Scottish people: schools, hospitals, jobs, and not all this theoretical talk of referendum.
You're coming to Scotland to give a speech in St Andrews about relations with Russia, which is timely, of course, with the build-up of NATO troops in Poland and the Baltic. We've had confirmation of Rex Tillerson as the US Secretary of State overnight. We know, of course, he has links to Russia, business links to Russia. Are you convinced of a US commitment for this build-up in the Balkans and Poland?
Yes, and Secretary Mattis, the Defence Secretary, has made that clear, and President Trump made it clear that he's 100% committed to NATO. We will be part of the US battalion that's being sent forward into Poland. We're sending our own troops through into Estonia. It is very important that we stand up to this Russian aggression and the testing of the NATO alliance. And I'm in no doubt that the new American administration is as committed to NATO as the previous one was. America has always led in NATO, but it's important that it continues to do so.
Are we returning to a Cold War situation?
Well, we've seen an extraordinary increase in Russian aggression just over the last 2 or 3 years, with the annexation of Crimea, the insurgency in the Ukraine, in eastern Ukraine. We've seen more submarine activity, long-range aviation. We saw the Russian cruiser group aircraft carrier going down to Syria. So, we need to be firm as an alliance and stand up to it. We also need, where necessary, to continue a dialogue with Russia. And I'll be making those points at St Andrews tonight after my visit to some defence industry in Scotland this morning.
Just on another issue, have your officials carried out a full analysis of what went wrong with the Trident launch off Florida last year?
I think that we don't discuss operational details of the testing that we do of our Trident submarines. What I can do is assure you, as I assured Parliament, that the submarine that carried out those tests has successfully returned now to the operational cycle based off Fallon, and we are in no doubt about
based
the
off Fallon, as you say. So you can understand why people in Scotland might be concerned with these nuclear submarines and the weapons on their doorstep. Have remedies been put in place?
I'm not getting into the details of the particular tests, except to tell you that it was successful, that the submarine is now part again of the operational cycle.
The Trident launch was successful?
The test that the submarine had to go through, coming out of a long refit, was could it take its place again in the operational cycle of our 4 submarines. It passed those tests, and HMS Vengeance is now back in the operational cycle, operating from Fallon. And let me just reassure you, we have absolutely no doubt as to the safety, the capability, the effectiveness of the nuclear deterrent.
So Michael Fallon, the Secretary of State for Defence, thank you for your time this morning.